Join Edwin Frondozo on the Business Leadership Podcast every week for a unique program featuring insights and actionable items from the world's most successful business leaders. Hear firsthand the exclusive interviews and personal journeys on how today's transformational leaders made it to the top.
I hear a lot about, millennials in the workforce and people hiring. As we bring millennials in, I think those stereotypes, some of them are true, but a lot of them just need some intervention and guidance from more business mature leaders like yourself and myself that can actually help these younger folks that are full of excitement. That they just need a different management style.
This is the Business Leadership Podcast, and I'm your host, Edwin Frondozo. Happy New Year to you, and welcome to the first episode of 2020. First off, I am so happy and grateful that you are taking the time and joining me today. And in today's episode, my guest is Carmine Cinerari. He is the president of Sharp Electronics of Canada, and I'm so excited to share the conversation I had with him, where he shares his wisdom, his management style, and share some tools that helped him grow into the leader he is today. In this episode, you will hear how Carmine uses meditation to expand the levels of his knowledge and consciousness, and that helps him become a better leader every day. How immersing himself in the Japanese management style taught him a different side to leadership, and why he believes that there needs to be some transparency and communication during a company's turbulent times. Today's episode is brought to you by Slingshot, a Canadian telecommunications leader that provides business VoIP solutions that empowers the emerging and innovative organizations that are looking to work with partners that understand what it takes to effectively run a business. Slingshot's business VoIP service ensures that companies are communicating clearly to their customers, team members, and stakeholders. Unlike traditional telcos and cloud providers, their business success advisors understand what it takes to grow and scale a business. To learn more, go to slingshotvoip.com/TBLP. Now with that, here we go. Welcome to the Business Leadership Podcast, Carmine.
Hey, thanks, Edwin. My pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm super excited, super happy to have you. Actually, this is a long time coming. Quick story for you listeners. This is actually Carmine and I's second attempt at our conversation, and 2 months apart. So I'm excited to get this conversation, Carmine.
Sorry about that, Edwin. That was my fault, I think.
I don't think there was any fault. I think it was meant to be at this time. So I'm happy to connect with you. Carmine, maybe if you could just introduce yourself to us. Can you tell us, who is Carmine?
Okay, loaded question. So I'm Carmine Cinerari, and I'm the president of Sharp Electronics here in Canada. Right now, we're marketing basically a full range of business technology products like multifunction printers and displays. And we also still have a range of consumer products, including, believe it or not, calculators and air purifiers and cooking appliances. On the personal side, I have one wife and two elder boys, 17 and 21, one just finishing up high school and one in university. And I find, where I am right now at my age and my tenure in my career, one of my biggest hobbies, I consider it a hobby, believe it or not, is just to keep learning and seeking opportunities to learn new things and connect with people that can perhaps teach me new things. Especially in the last few years, just a really renewed interest in reading and staying current on technology and social trends. I've been fortunate in my career to have a lot of travel. I've been to Japan about 50 times, believe it or not.
Wow.
I've traveled extensively with my family too. So I do, as much as business travel has its downsides, I find now in the being a bit older and being a bit more mature, I can handle that a lot better. I'm far better organized, and with technology, it's easy to stay connected and not get overwhelmed by being out of the office.
No, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing, Carmine. And it's a trait I hear a lot on this show about the willingness to learn, the curiosity to learn. What are some of the? I mean, on the personal side, what are some of the new things that you're learning that you're really pumped about on the person? I guess on the side.
Something I'm really pumped about, but I'm not getting much airplay with my friends and relatives. Is I was exposed to meditation actually through. So someone that I worked with here was a pretty a Buddhist, and she gave me a lot of reading material on Buddhism, which was quite interesting, and a lot of it around mindfulness. So now I find I have a real interest, a non-business interest in just the ability for your mind to sort of expand the levels of your knowledge and your consciousness, shall we say.
Right.
So actually, one of the craziest ideas I've had in a while is maybe to entertain a retreat, a silent retreat where you actually try and connect with yourself in a different way without the stimulation of technology or books or even exercise for that matter.
Oh wow! I mean that's great, and I mean I have myself a meditation routine and exercise, and it's super fascinating, and I'm happy that you are discovering that. Have you noticed the change not only personally but also professionally with this practice?
Absolutely. One of the big things, and I think I go on and on about this to my team a lot, is just how distracted we are as people right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that just introduces a whole new level of challenge in managing people and managing a company, that we're very easily distracted by shiny objects. And I find, through being more, I guess, more conscious of distraction,
Mm-hmm.
it helps me to, little disciplines like turning your computer off or not bringing it to a meeting and having your phone a distance from you, and really, really trying to engage with people in a deep way rather than just, filling, sort of being the cliche of uber distracted all the time. It has really helped me. I mean, I can sit down and get my productivity is a lot better just because I can focus on, frankly speaking, sometimes one thing at a time. To be, multitasking can be a bit of a misnomer sometimes.
100%. And honestly, Carmine, I mean, I know this is not a meditation. It is a leadership course and program, but I do love mindfulness type practices. So I'm really curious.
Edwin, it's funny you say that, because it isn't a leadership. It isn't necessarily a leadership issue, but I think any tools that we can sort of evangelize around making yourself a better leader. I think mindfulness or meditation is a big one, because frankly, the better you are, the more in control you are of yourself. It does a lot for your business stamina and your concentration and your decision making, and it's really hard not to have a good business case to actually get into it.
Yeah. So I love that, because that was sort of where I was leading to, Carmine. As you've experienced the change of you becoming a better leader, ultimately a better human, do you see yourself sort of implementing some type of course or program with your leadership team here to help them see, the benefits of it?
I haven't had any takers on the 10-day retreat, but yes, to be frank with you, a couple of my coworkers or my team have started reading and listening to podcasts and things like that around mindfulness and meditation. And frankly, it's really nice to be able to share, as much as we share the business issues and things like that on a day-to-day basis. When we're on business trips and stuff, it is nice to. So I do see that as something I would want to implement in 2020, is at least some awareness around.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, we have a lot more capability than we give ourselves credit for sometimes, if we would just focus on spending time on the right things.
Yeah, no, 100%. And maybe, Carmine, a 10-day silent retreat is a little overboard as an introductory
Yes.
meditation 101.
I'm looking for a shorter one, Edwin. So if you know any, I'd love to hear about them.
Oh, 100%. Because actually, I personally have looked into those week 10-day silent retreats, but I have a young family. I have a 3.5-year-old. So taking 10 days off my parenting duties might not fly well, but maybe finding a 2-3 day one would probably be much better. So if I do find one, Carmine, I will pass it to you.
Yeah.
And we could go hang out and be in silence together for
I'd love to join you. Sure. It's a good way to get to know each other.
Exactly. So let's just get back into, I guess, your current role here at Sharp Canada. And I'm always interested, as when I talk to this business leader, like what are you currently focused on? Do you have specific goals over the next 6 to 12 months in your role, or anything you're trying to achieve?
I think I don't know. We have a lot of initiatives on the product and technology side still to come. Organizationally, we're organized around 2 business groups. One of them is more of a business products and technology group, or our business solutions group, and then one of them is a consumer group. So there's a lot of different initiatives. On the consumer side, we plan to launch really a wider assortment of cooking appliances, cooking appliances. Sharp has some technology there. We're pretty strong in air purification in that market. And believe it or not, we still sell literally hundreds of thousands of calculators every year for back to school and tax time and seasonally. So that's still a good business for us. On the B2B side, we're pretty razor focused on the multifunction printer market. We've been growing our share. We've been growing our unit quantity and our revenue in that business for the last 3 years. But we also have a lot of products to come. On the display side, we're launching a Windows collaboration display. So in partnership with Microsoft, we're marketing a 70-inch 4K display with a lot of AI sensors to allow it to monitor, things like temperature, humidity, air quality in the room. But for myself, the next 2020, probably one of the themes for 2020 for me in the organization is just challenging ourselves a bit more to do more with the same resources, and actually perhaps to challenge the relationships with some of our channel partners to get them out of their comfort zone a little bit more. Because Sharp is a global company. It's quite diverse. Back in 2016, we had a significant investment from Foxconn, a Taiwanese EMS. And their scale, their manufacturing scale is, easily 10 times what Sharp ever was. So we have a lot of interesting partnerships in the background that people might not realize are about Sharp. So, I spend a lot of time, frankly, trying to look around corners and make sure that the company's positioned and adaptable to cope with whatever's next. And for myself, again, keeping the organization nimble. I consider myself a bit of a facilitator of disciplined decisions and actions, making sure that we don't, I kind of call it big company disease. We want to make sure we keep the organization logical and flat so that there's no internal barriers to growth or to serving clients or to making good business decisions. So it's really, for me, it's a combo. I'm close to the product development, but not as close as I used to be. I'm more focused on, the organization and keeping the organization healthy.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll get back in terms of like how you got away from being closer to the product. But what's interesting to me is, Sharp is a global brand. It's a global organization. And you mentioned, having your resources in. Sharp Canada is a subsidiary, right?
Yes.
So how do you manage, how do you implement or even localize, the corporate strategy, the global corporate strategy effectively, Carmine?
That's been a lot of learning and fun, actually. And for context, I've been with Sharp since 1996, actually. So in April, it'll be 24 years. And
Wow, congrats.
prior to Sharp, I was at a company that's almost disappeared from the market now, but it might be a brand that you'd remember if you're old enough, is JVC.
I know that brand.
Yeah, they were pretty famous for a lot of things. I mean, audio and TVs and VCRs.
VCRs.
Imagine recording things on tape, but that was actually, even when I started at Sharp in 96, my first job was actually product manager for camcorders and VCRs. Back to the question. So I think a lot of it was garnered from me getting a deep understanding and appreciation, frankly, for Japanese culture and Japanese management, and then taking that and localizing it to the market. Again, it came with I think at the time I might not have, but it did have a lot of pain and sacrifice in that I would spend on the high side maybe 7 times a year in Japan, sort of indoctrinating myself into the culture of Japanese management. And along the same lines, I had a lot of great influencers there. I don't know if I'd call them mentors in the true sense, but just gaining a lot of experience in how to succeed in a Japanese company, and then taking that forward into Canada. A lot of times Japanese companies, they assign expats from Japan. So headquarters staff work in the local markets all over the world. In the last few years, that's really been not really the program. So the good news is there is a strong belief, and I would include myself in there, of local managers that have credibility, that they can implement the corporate direction or the corporate culture and adapt it to the local market. But I think the first step for me was obviously understanding and feeling really comfortable with the corporate culture and strategy, and then bringing this back and communicating it to the local employees. And a lot of it isn't, it's not particularly complicated. It's just a matter of communication, collaborating. Japanese management tends to be big on consensus, which can have its downside too. But, going to the site of problems is another good learning from Japanese management. So you tend not to be a behind your desk manager. You tend to go to the source of problems and ask why 5 times as to why things happen. The other thing, I think, over the years, just building the internal respect and trust that allows the parent company Sharp to be able to trust, my decision making and my management style, and hopefully it culminates in good performance for the subsidiary. So it's just been really assimilating myself into the corporate culture. And then as a Canadian, I'm born in Canada. I was raised here. I mean, just localizing it to our market. The good thing is I have the respect of the parents. So, if there's things that there's obviously a lot of different, whatever they be, employment requirements or whatever requirements, Sharp has a pretty good global organization to respect that and let us execute the business in the best way for our local market.
I see. So for those who are who may be listening and maybe is starting their career or within their career of learning a new culture, a new environment, if you were to do it all again, what would you focus on that would help you understand that communications gap or translating it to a localized environment?
It's a great question. If I think back to when I started at JVC, I can't remember if I was engaged or married at the time, but I remember going home, and I had been raised in a pretty standard middle class family. My dad did work afternoons and nights periodically when I was younger, but later in life he was more of a 9 to 5 or so. We'd always have dinner together as a family. But I remember when I started working in Japanese companies, my first job at JVC, I was sitting beside a Japanese gentleman. And when I say sitting beside, I literally mean like old school Japanese office where we were sitting almost shoulder to shoulder, and had a big sort of dot matrix printer beside me. And I was there a week, and, I'd be leaving at 6 o'clock. And this gentleman would be there after I left, not knowing that he was there till, midnight or whenever he had to be there because of the time zone difference. And I went home and I said to my wife, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, because I said, this guy beside me is such a valuable resource. He's going to teach me a lot, but a lot of it gets done after 5. And it just required a lot of stamina in the beginning to really, I hate to say it, but sacrifice on behalf of your learning to commit to part of the Japanese style. The working and the things that get done after hours can be pretty important. Because, when you're working your way up through an organization, those things become important. So it's really the stamina to follow maybe something that's not really the local custom. If I worked for a German-based company or a headquartered company, I'm sure I would have to adapt to the different internal culture that would be there. And that would just be, frankly, by embracing it and trying to learn it as quickly as I could.
Great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And given your experience in, I guess, travel and embracing different cultures, Carmine, do you see any unique attributes when it comes to the Canada's business environment? Like, basically, that would give any of the Canadian leaders an experience edge.
I love giving shout out to Canadian executives, because it's nothing, not a slight against any other country's executives, but I just find Canadian executives a little bit humbler or lower ego because of the smaller market size. That's one factor. And then the other thing is just the Canadian market itself. There's such a diversity in terms of ethnic or cultural or gender and other sort of demographic factors that force, as a Canadian business leader operating nationally across the country, you've got to address, all these things in your marketing and your product development and your go-to-market strategy and your employee retention. So, Canada has such a high proportion of foreign-born people that, and there's like wide income demographics and everything across the social spectrum that, I don't know, it just looks on the surface like a great place to develop leaders and even to test market products. Because of our size, the risk you would take on developing or test marketing a new product concept or something in Canada would be relatively low than going big into the United States. And a lot of companies have gone into the United States at their peril, because it is a bit of it's a different market for a lot of reasons. So yeah, I think being Canadian, I found my cultural sensitivity back to the Japanese experience. I've been here a long time, but I don't really make a big distinction between my Japanese coworkers and myself. At my heart, I'm Canadian, but we're able to embrace culture. It's such a neat place. I've lived in Toronto most of my life and all of my life, and it's such a diverse city. If you want to have authentic ethnic cuisine of anything, you can have it, you can find it, you can meet people, it's very different than Japan, obviously, where, almost no immigration into Japan. The marketing strategy tends to be very straightforward. If you understand Japanese culture, you know how to market in Japan. Well, we've got language differences, we've got all sorts of cultures and ethnic backgrounds. It's a pretty cool place to do business. And it's a nice challenge for a leader in the market.
As business leaders, we enter a new year and a new decade with new goals. But do you have a clear vision of where, and how to grow your business? How will your workforce look like? So as we prepare for the growing gig economy and remote workforce, it is important to understand that you are working with communications partners that will help you get there. Slingshot understands the growing needs of business leaders and works with them to ensure their infrastructure is aligned to their vision and growth plans of the future. To learn more, go to slingshotvoip.com/TBLP. I'm just switching gears, Carmine, and I'd love to get your thoughts. Because when I look at, I guess, Sharp Corporation's last few years, I mean, it went through some difficulties. So I'm wondering how or what advice you can offer to someone who may be leading an organization that's going through some turbulent times.
I think my reflection on that, I think, well, you're bringing up bad times, so I'm gonna give you some context on our times. So really, in 2007 in Canada, anyway, and even for Sharp Corp, that would have been probably close to a record year in terms of revenue and profit. And generally in Canada, everything was pretty strong and well with customer relationships and market share and brand image and sales, and that was great. In 2008, fortunately or unfortunately, that was when I was promoted to lead the company, and things got, really interestingly negative. So the Canadian dollar was weakening against the US dollar. We had a global financial crisis with in Japanese we call it Lehman shock in September, and then at the same, so we had Canadian problems, but then globally, Sharp had invested quite heavily in LCD manufacturing, and the corporate balance sheet and the income statement were strained, and there was a lot of competition. So 2008 was like, if I reflect on my career, 2007 would be the highest high, and strangely, 2008 might be the lowest low in terms of profit decline and sales decline. So basically, I had to reflect on the fact that maybe what got me this far wasn't going to sustain me through this. So, I had built a style which I still have, which is to be very transparently celebratory about numbers. So when the company's doing well, it's quite easy. I mean, you're presenting high growth sales numbers and profits good and market share is good. But in tough times, you need to really carefully contextualize what's happening. So, but I had to stay true to the fact that I wanted to be transparent. So it wasn't the time to sort of cocoon and hide from the reality. Because even the news cycles come a long way even since then, but the employees are bombarded with information from the public sources that they need context on. Otherwise, you'd have a mass exodus of the company. So I think if I were to think of a few things that for leaders to do during crisis would be err on the side of over communication and really exercising, I'll call it participative management. So be there on the front line with your team. So I think if you don't have a leadership voice in your company, it might be the time that you develop it or find someone who can evangelize whatever positive message or whatever you can find out of turbulent times. And then it's also a time when I found that it was helpful to have the trust of the organization in you, because it is a leap of faith if the leader's saying that we're going to be fine and we're going to get through this. I mean, the implication is that they trust what you're doing and your judgment and the decisions you're making. But again, I think it also was a time maybe when I learned the authenticity side. You smile when it's time to smile, but you're inevitably going to go through times when you got to be real. You might have to do things. You might have to restructure. You might have to lay people off. You might have to report losses. So if you're real, you're going to have an emotional response to that. And I found that therapeutic, not only for myself, but even for the people that might have been on the wrong side of receiving negativity through turbulent times. If it's handled properly, it tends not to be as bad as everyone thinks. And the other thing was really, as a leader, making yourself available to answer concerns really night or day from customers, from employees, from any stakeholders, because the public releases or the media speculation or whatever can continue through the night. So you could literally get an email forwarded from Edwin that says, "Hey, Sharp's teetering on a problem," or something like that. And a lot of it could be speculation, as you might imagine, but it's important to respond to those things in a constructive way. So I just found myself really over communicating, upping the town halls. Like nowadays we do them probably quarterly with a monthly email, but in those days we were doing them at least monthly. And if there was significant enough developments, we would just call an all hands meeting on the spot. And I think I was maybe nowadays going through that, I probably toned down the amount of numbers that I present to the team. But in those days, I remember going through, looking for good news would be, for example, keeping your expenses in check, or hitting your budget even though it's a decline versus the prior year, or whatever the corporate direction at that time was. So it's really just keeping everybody grounded by communicating.
Yeah, no, it's super important to communicate and be transparent. And I think that was some key lessons that I heard as you shared, I guess, the experience as you took on the new role and managed it successfully. And congrats to that. And thank you for sharing that, because it's definitely not easy to share these type of things, but there's a lot of, like you said, wisdom and insight
that when I find when you work, so I believe you have your own company, and that's a bit different when you have a parent corporation that's publicly traded on the market and stuff. So you could literally, you won't be in the know on everything that's developing in the corporation. But I think it's being able to respond to that credibly, and just being transparent. And I've through my career, I've run into other leaders in the same role as myself that work for foreign parents. And there's how do I say this nicely? There's a bit of a nasty tactic that leaders can use in it, where you become a victim of your own corporation. You know what I'm saying? Where, I never exercise that story, because, and as much as Canada wouldn't swing the corporate balance sheet or income statement one way or the other, I would always take responsibility for what we owned, which was the Canadian market. So I never exercised the ability to say, I don't know what's happening, or I don't have faith in what's happening. You have to own it. Regardless of if you're in control of it, it's your corporation too. So
that's right.
Cool experience.
No, 100%. One thing that I find fascinating, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this, Carmine, is when I actually looked into your career trajectory, and you mentioned it at the top. You've been at Sharp Canada for 24 years, very traditional way to grow. I mean, it's very uncommon now. I mean, you see a lot of people, and I'm sure it could be challenges within your own organizations where, rising leaders are leaving.
Yeah.
So first off, I guess I'd love to get some of if you had any difficult decisions that you had to make throughout this tenure at this point, that you could share that really, obviously you shared the one when you took over as president. So that was a lot of difficult times and management skills that maybe you haven't exercised, but was there a key time that you could share that helped you grow?
Yeah. Beyond just the obvious thing of being promoted somewhat unexpectedly and suddenly, but that's a different story. But one of the things that I'd reflect on, I had grown up most of my career on the marketing side. So I was typically, I think when I was at JVC, I was a business planner and then went into product marketing and then came to Sharp and sort of worked my way up through the marketing group. I think one of the biggest, maybe stressful pivots at the time was to move into sales, to take on. So on the marketing and planning side, you're typically creating budgets and doing things like that. Where when you're in sales, it's more the quota and what you have, you actually have to deliver it. And you don't really, you have to take the tools the company gives you and deliver a number, which is a bit of a different dynamic than the marketing role. So I, when I was in marketing, I was probably the biggest critic of sales. And then when I went into sales, I became the biggest critic of marketing. So that was a big deal. I mean, and that was probably, I might classify that as one of the most important pivots I might have made, because the world looks a lot different in the office than it does when you're on an airplane and traveling across the country, right? So you're actually delivering the corporate message or the corporate strategy or whatever there is to deliver directly to the customers, and that's a different job, and it's it obviously gave me a different respect for sales. And, the importance of it and the difficulty of it, and kind of, it made me a stronger marketer, frankly, in the sense that you're listening to the customer's voice directly. It's not through any filter. The lines between sales and marketing today, I think, are far more blurred in a good way. I don't think you can be a good marketer if you don't understand sales, and probably vice versa. But those are special people to find. But I think that would have been one of the, let me think about it. If I considered it a decision at the time, anytime I've been given opportunity in my career, I didn't consider it a decision. I just had to take it. But to move, to take a role in sales, I did understand that. I mean, the number ultimately marketing hands it to you, and then it's yours.
Right.
Now it's a bit more collaborative, but I mean, I can remember a lot of stress around just delivering, especially in the consumer business, because within our company here, the business products is a different, there's a run rate, and there's not that there's more of a predictability, but in the consumer retail space, I mean, you can drop 15% of your month or 20% of your quarter in 3 days. Because there's things like Boxing Day and seasonality around holidays and things like that that can really impact the numbers. So yeah, being in sales was probably a big decision. I don't know that I don't think I had an option to decline it, but I think that was really necessary to probably put me where I am today.
Fun question, Carmine. If I were to ask any of your team members, colleagues, past or present, peers, what's the best leadership quality that you have? What do you think they would say?
Beyond good looking and great personality.
Well, obviously.
And we've never met, so that's good. You're only going by my photo. I think today they'd probably say a genuine care for people. I believe it that really I'm only as good as the people that I work with or that work for me or work on behalf of the company. It's pretty humbling when the people trust you and really can see it. It's ultimately my job to sell the vision or my vision, but I think it would be my probably the most humbling thing I think people would say was just a genuine care for people. If you had asked them 10 years ago, they might have said something else. They might have said numerical, analytical ability, and a driven sales mind. But lately, especially in the last few years, I'm pretty pragmatic guy, and I haven't really thrust myself into social media or other avenues. I'm sort of more motivated by seeing my team grow and develop and it generating good results. So I would go with genuine care for people, I would hope.
Carmine, do you have any final thoughts, observations? Ideally, what I'm trying to find is actionable recommendations that you could share to the growing business leaders who are listening today.
Yep. I would say leadership isn't for everyone. So I think there's a bravery that's necessary, a stamina and bravery. You've got to be able to bring some simplicity to complexity, and then determine, how you're going to get through problems or determine the objectives for your company or your business. And then I think the tough part for a lot of people is you got to have a voice. You have to have a leadership voice. I don't think this is a job that gets done electronically or on social media or by email. I mean, that's part of it. Mm-hmm. But I think, if you don't have a voice, then you better find people that can put your vision to a voice, because you need to evangelize the company and your brand and the vision you have for the company. And you need to have a voice to challenge your people to adapt to change or whatever happens in the market. I think another skill that I think is important is that distinction between leading from the front when you're taking your organization through turbulence or unknown territory. And then the other point would be maybe sometimes being brave enough to trust your team and lead from the back, sort of pushing them forward with your support. But again, for me, it's all about the people. I think surrounding yourself with great people, hiring great people. And then, I hear a lot about, millennials in the workforce and people hiring. I mean, our average age has been declining, but it's still probably a little bit high. But as we bring millennials in, I think those stereotypes, some of them are true, but a lot of them just need some intervention and guidance from more business mature leaders like yourself and myself that can actually help these younger folks that are full of excitement. They just need a different management style. They need to know why they're doing things and why the company exists and why change needs to be made. And I think, they may not stay around for the longest time, but I think it would be a shame if an experienced leader didn't intervene and really guide the young talent, even in their personal lives or their reputation management or their business maturity. Because even with my kids, they're older than your kids, my 21-year-old or my 17. I mean, they don't really think anything of what they're doing now activity-wise on social media and stuff, but that kind of stuff just comes with maturity, and they need guidance in that sense. They take a lot of things for granted. Then the other thing that I think, is really important for a leader is just simply living by, if it's not you, then who's going to do things? If you're not going to prompt change, then who do you expect to do it? It's always about someone taking ownership and leadership over something.
Yeah, no, amazing. Well, thank you for sharing. Amazing conversation, Carmine. I'm going to ask you if you could tell us where you could find more information about you, but I know
I'll tell you where you won't find me on Facebook or Twitter, but that's nothing against them. But if you want more information about Sharp Canada, you can obviously go to sharp.ca. And if you wanted more interest about Sharp as a corporation, sharp-world.com. And then if you do want to reach out to me, which I do accept, you can find me on LinkedIn.
And obviously I'm going to share when Carmine and I are in a silent retreat.
Yes.
Awesome. Carmine, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the Business Leadership Podcast.
Thanks a lot, Edwin. Nice talking to you.
That's it, biz leaders. Thank you for joining me on the first episode of 2020. This was episode 141 of the Business Leadership Podcast with special guest Carmine Cinerari. If you want to learn more about Carmine, Sharp Electronics, or anything else that we discussed, please go to thebusinessleadership.com/141. Also, please join me on my private Facebook group where I will discuss this episode, answer your questions, and connect you with other like-minded business leaders. Simply search for the Business Leadership Group directly in the Facebook. Thank you again to Slingshot, a Canadian telecommunications leader in business VoIP communications, a company that understands strategic growth, which aligns with your vision and goals of the future. Lastly, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe, rate, and leave a comment on your favorite podcast provider. Thanks again. Edwin signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Business Leadership Podcast at thebusinessleadership.com.